This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. You are looking at independent journalist Matt Taibbi. And for those that don't know who he is, he was one of the two journalists with Michael Shellenberger who exposed the Twitter files, exposing the government's collusion with tech companies in censoring Americans. What was revealed in this congressional hearing is this censorship industrial complex. Now, if you've been following my channel for a while, I have been showing everyone how Harry and Meghan have been very much a part of this censorship machine. And this morning, Matt Taibbi releases a whole set of new information that does implicate Harry and Meghan in this whole scheme, to which I call on Jim Jordan to subpoena this foreign prince on U.S. soil who has been undermining the U.S. Constitution. Get yourself a cozy beverage and get comfortable, because we're about to light this on fire. Let's get started. Today, I'm going to be bringing to you Matt Taibbi's censorship files. Since the Twitter files, Racket, in conjunction with Undead FOIA, has sent out hundreds of Freedom of Information requests to publicly funded anti-disinformation programs across the country, such as the Aspen Institute Commission on Information Disorder, also known as ACID, for documentation purposes. On Harry's new website, Sussex.com, he boldly confirms his participation within this group. And he describes this group as coming together with critical voices across public, private, and civil society landscape to respond to the challenges created by growing disinformation. Well, that's not how it was advertised back in April of 2021. The goal of this group was to put together this report, which was aiming to identify and prioritize the most critical sources and causes of information disorder and deliver a set of short-term actions and longer-term goals to help government, the private sector, and civil society respond to this modern-day crisis of faith in key institutions. In November of 2021, this was the report that was delivered. Now that we're all caught up with Harry's participation, let's now get into the information that was dropped today. This article, published by Matt Taibbi and Undead FOIA, reveals Gary Kasparov's comparison of this Commission on Information Disorder and what they were doing back during that time. Here's what the article had to say. The list of commissioners was headlined by Katie Couric, Prince Harry, and Chris Krebs, the founding director of the DHS's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, also known as CISA. Also, that same department, and I'm just adding this now, DHS is the one that's holding Harry's visa, so keep that in the back of your head. Kate Starbird of the University of Washington, a central figure in recent high-profile media features condemning congressional and journalistic investigations of anti-disinfo programs, would join as well. Thanks to a FOIA request Racket submitted to Starbird's employers, we know world chess champion Gary Kasparov was at some point on the commission. He would not remain on it for long. Aspen's information disorder team included many who'd attend the Institute's infamous tabletop exercise, outed by Michael Shellenberger in the Twitter files. In that story, reporters and think tankers used extraordinary pre-science to wargame non-coverage of a potential hack-and-dump story involving Hunter Biden and Burisma. They began work on Exercise, the Burisma leak, 2 months before the full story came out in the New York Post. Because of Roth's presence, early chatter and embargoed drafts of commission reports appeared in the Twitter files. And they're talking about Yoel Roth, who was the head of site integrity at Twitter. Now pay attention to this part because it's important. The information disorder team gathered in August 2020 to begin work. Early drafts show the team quickly strayed from disinformation to ideas for conquering racism, misogyny, poverty, even reforming journalism, proposing to adjust journalistic norms to avoid false equivalence in the pursuit of both sides and objectivity. Complaining often about First Amendment restraints, they advocated an approach that would align with Europe's Digital Services Act, suggesting Americans wanted a cleaner internet, even if it means losing some freedom. Okay, let's pause right here. The first sentence of the information disorder team gathered in August of 2020 to begin work is true because Harry does confirm it in this Time 100 special that they did with Renee DiResta, amongst others who were a part of this disinformation board. So we know that this couple had been working with this group in 2020 when they came over here. Again, this is all before the election. The second point that I'd like to make is let's not forget that Harry had the audacity to call our First Amendment bonkers and then reading this to assume that he thinks Americans would be willing to lose some of that freedom for a so-called cleaner internet. This should make Americans so pissed off because this man, I mean, it's bad enough we have Americans here who think that they can speak on behalf of all of us, but we have a foreign prince here who is dictating what our rights are okay to have and not have. You know what I mean? Like, Harry doesn't speak for me or any other American on how much freedom we have on freedom of speech. Go fuck yourself, Harry. It gets worse, folks. This next part, many of you are going to see the penny drop for understanding why Harry and Meghan did what they did to the royal family. It continues to say, they went on to issue extraordinary recommendations. Only some survived in the final published version. Ideas for punishing misinformation included demoting posts that weren't even incorrect. A proposal to ban savvy spreaders would go after accounts based on a pattern of behavior rather than each specific post. The commission also proposed a digital holding area for users guilty of repeat bad behavior. But the main course was a truth, racial healing, and transformation TRHT framework. And what this is, it seeks to bring about transformational and sustainable change and to address the historic and contemporary effects of racism using community-based processes that include wide-scale public truth-telling, racial healing, and relationship building. Sounds like something off the Archwell website, right? Anyway, the basic theory was disinformation about everything from slavery to Japanese internment caused political divisions. So addressing the problem also meant correcting the impact of centuries of misinformed thinking. This included strict monitoring of workplace diversity, standardized DEI reporting, publish regular updates detailing hiring, retention, and promotion data, and establishing a new agency to promote infrastructure and capacity building. The organization would be paid for by general taxes, voluntary corporate investment, and FTC fines. Boy, this sounds a lot like what they did with Nagazi Fugazi and Lady Susan Hussey and saying that, oh, we need a diversity czar at Buckingham Palace. Now you understand why these Marxists didn't do anything when Meghan and Harry got up on Oprah and lied their face off about the royal family being racist. This was all part of the narrative that they were pushing. Safia Noble even went a step further to go sit in Meghan and Harry's shitflix, supporting the work that Bot Sentinel was doing in that Fugazi report that was put out targeting Caucasian women. I'm so livid about this because how many of us, when this Oprah wine fest came out, were saying like, wow, can't believe that Harry now is joining this disinformation board to talk about mis and disinformation when he is like the biggest super spreader out there. Well, that's because all these people were in support of it. That's the crazy thing to me, is that they all were on board with what Harry and Meghan were doing. It's most likely the reason why he wasn't kicked off the commission in the first place, because this was all part of the plan. So now enter in this guy, Gary Kasparov. So he was actually a commissioner, and he was alarmed by what he was seeing. The article continues. Few public figures have been more staunch in their opposition to Donald Trump or in their embrace of tough measures to prevent foreign disinformation. But the broad nature of the Aspen Group's aims were apparently a bridge too far. On September 2nd, 2020, Kasparov, who has not responded to requests for comment, sent a letter to Aspen resigning from the commission. Marked for distribution, it did not mince words, taking serious issue with the Aspen recommendations. This is the actual letter, as you can see here, with bullet number 7, or the second one, that poses a big alarm or red flag. It says here, recruit, hire, and support a diverse workforce. And number 20, remaking media and newsroom integrity and structure. Gary writes, it seems like some pretty significant mission creep for us to comment on the hiring practices of private companies when our mission is to combat misinformation. It also implies that information's trustworthiness depends in large part on the identity of its purveyor, which strikes me as the last thing we'd want to convey. Facts should either be supported or disproven on their own merits. If I'm being honest, having a commission on disinformation determine acceptable levels of diversity reminds me of home. This type of approach was common practice in the USSR, where some commission or ministry would arbitrarily tell companies whom they should or should not hire. If we were to use this approach, would we also seek out ideological diversity? I think it's fair to assume that reporters in a newsroom are ideologically rather homogeneous as well. I'm not looking to be unnecessarily provocative here, but we should be careful to focus on our core mission and avoid expending political capital on proposals that don't directly address misinformation. This is evidence right here. I mean, this is not democracy. They're pushing full-on socialism. Matt Taibbi explains, the Soviets used everything from worker and peasant inspectorates to psychiatric bodies to punish suspect political behavior. The commission similarly imagined using the narrow remit of disinformation to reach into remote political corners, subjecting would-be offenders to everything from advertising bans to denial of services to revocation of medical accreditation. Kasparov's observation was sadly prescient. In an initial email from Vivian Schiller, who is the executive director of Aspen Digital, she kindly asked not to share either letter or news of this resignation. But here's another detail that has yet to be pointed out that I think it's relevant to our audience. Dear Commissioners, I'm forwarding below a note from Gary tendering his resignation from the Commission. I will let his words speak for themselves. In the spirit of begging forgiveness instead of asking permission, I've openly CC'd you all in order to facilitate dialogue. Michael is standing in for Harry. Michael Dale Stein, that name sounds so familiar. Oh, right. He was featured on the Archwell Fugazi Public Charity tax return in 2022. Now, the question I have is, why is he featured on the 2022 form when his services were happening in 2021? Also, why did they misrepresent this guy's title, Senior Strategic Advisor, when he works for Sunshine Sachs? Yes, the same Sunshine Sachs whose CEO, Ken Sunshine, is best friends with Hillary Clinton. As I've been stating all along, that Sunshine Sachs had been involved with this situation. Now, I haven't even scratched the surface on all the information that had been dropped today in these censorship files. It's like over 1,000 pages of communication between the University of Washington and all these people who are part of this censorship industrial complex. I don't know if Matt realizes it or not, but this one little detail about Michael Dale Stein has opened now up a can of worms and is not looking so good for Harry and Meghan, especially if there's a possibility that Harry was a part of this tabletop exercise to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story at the Aspen Institute with the other commissioners. What do you guys think? In my opinion, I think he knew about it, just like how he said he knew about January 6th. These are the very same people that have been mucking around behind the scenes. But in any case, what do you guys think? Definitely leave your thoughts below. A lot of information has been dropped today, and I suspect that there are going to be more things that will be uncovered connecting these two to this whole censorship operation. Stay tuned. If I find anything, for sure, I will definitely let you know. But until then, please be safe, and I will talk to you later. Bye.
I was such a fraud.